Hey everybody, this is Perch, and thanks for joining me, and Larry, thanks for coming back and joining me too.
Thank you for having me on. It's very fun to talk with you and to the watching audience. And thank you for joining us, folks, on this very warm Friday evening, depending on where you are, or Saturday night, depending on that. But thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're triple digits. Is that in weather right now? You're triple digits in heat?
It was for a bit. Sun's starting to go down. Currently, the sun is right there at the tree line. Big old clouds are blocking most of the UV rays, but I can still feel the heat radiating in through the walls, which is very fun. But that's the price to pay for being in the South. Mild winters usually, and summers where it's like you kind of wish you could turn into Uncle Frank from Hellraiser, just like rip your own flesh off, so you don't have to deal with it. But even that wouldn't work because like you can't take enough clothes off, you can't take your skin off to get cool. But it's miserable.
No way. Okay, well, thanks for joining me, and hopefully you've got something cold to drink.
Oh, I do. I don't have any alcoholic beverages, but I do have a limited edition Taco Bell brand Mountain Dew Baja Blast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which I've not seen one in forever. Saw some before the pandemic started around that time. Haven't seen any since. Saw one, grabbed it, put it in the freezer, ice chilled. So it's I've been drinking water all day, and I'm sick and tired of the taste of water, which is like how first world problem of me of that is like most of the world doesn't have clean drinking water, and hell, most of America don't have clean drinking water. Flint, Navajo reservations, Hopi reservations all over, and I'm over here. I've been tired of drinking clean, fresh, cold water. It's just tap water, room temperature. I need some Baja Blast Mountain Dew. I need some of that diabetes. So. That liquid diabetes. But
I'm having a bit of whiskey and Coke is what I'm having.
You know what? I've never had that. I've never touched whiskey. Believe it or not, whiskey and Coke, ice cold glass. It seems like that because you're supposed to ice and whiskey, correct?
Oh yeah. No, but unless you get a giant. I love how this is a comics channel. We're going right into weather and whiskey. It's perfect. No, it's you need a big piece of ice, like one that's not going to melt. You don't want that water to dilute the whiskey.
Yeah.
So, got a nice big piece of ice in here, and you can chill the glass. I'm going to get into ceramic at some point. I don't know. Whatever. It's fun. We're having a good time. What kind of whiskey? Says the audience. So there's a whiskey up here in Washington called Woodinville whiskey that is quite good. It's great to just drink straight. I don't know if they sell it outside of this area, but it's really good whiskey. So that's what I'm drinking tonight.
That sounds good. That real expensive was Japanese whiskey or whatever, that stuff.
Oh, yeah. There's great Japanese whiskey.
Apparently it's legendary. It's like if you're going to drink it, that's that top shelf.
Oh,
like let's go ahead and go for broke, literally.
Go for broke. Yes, definitely. And what's funny is a lot cheaper over there. But if you are, there are definitely people who love it or hate it. But I just good Japanese whiskey is just hard to beat.
Yeah, this time of year, the main reason I don't drink it's not because some utterly puritanical deal. It's like I grew up around people that would drink to excess and multiple people drinking and driving. There's when they bring a wrecked car to a school. You probably didn't have that when they had a Model T. They had a Model T when you went to snow.
Oh,
and I'm sorry. That was. I was like, if I hadn't reiterated, it would have been probably funnier if I just kept going. But I had to go ahead and say, beat that dead horse. No, but I accidentally went to a car wreck that was back in the day before. Like, oh, this person's been in an accident. Oh, your friend has been in an accident. Okay, wasn't my friend. It was my babysitter's friend. And we had to take her home at the end of her babysitting shift, basically. Mm-hmm. Go to the accident scene, and it's like Cronenberg levels of horror. And it's like at 5 years old, I'm like, man, no wonder I'm into like gore and violence and drawings and stuff. It's like traumatized. It's like some almost David Lynchian in some regards, like some of that stuff. The beauty and the horror both at the same time. That's why I gravitated so much to Blue Velvet. But I learned at a young age also watching my uncle nearly get his head blown off by one of those firework mortars. He stumbled in a cornfield that had been, not cornfield, it was actually soybeans. He tripped. They rotate corn and soybeans, and he tripped while trying to light the mortar. He tripped, lit it, tripped. His head would end up in front of it, and if he hadn't rolled out of the way, the mortar would have bounced, come straight out of the tube and hit him square in the face. And he would drink and drive. He would have no problem telling people, "Yeah, drink and drive. It isn't a big deal." It's like, so it's like one of those deals. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna stay away from him. I'm not gonna get anywhere near where he parks.
Good plan.
It's probably a good idea, but
I don't know if anybody remembers this in the chat. I promise we're going to comics, but in terms of memories, there's some places in Colorado, and I know other places in the country has it too, where there's drive-up liquor stores where it's like a drive-through, and they'll just
Pennsylvania has that, I think.
Yeah, but you're just you're supposed to promise not to drink what they hand you, but I mean it's right there. You know? I don't know. It seems like a conflict of interest at any point. But hey, we've got some questions already in the chat. A lot of things happened this week. It's been a weird, since we were on. Since you and I were on, it's been a long time. But
3 weeks.
Yes, 3 weeks. Comic-Con came and went, and very few people noticed. That's problem number one. But it's been a weird. I don't know if people are just getting agitated because it's hot or what's going on. But it is. It feels like people are getting a lot more spicy. There's a lot more angst going on in the comic group over the last couple of weeks. Have you noticed any of this?
I have, and I've tried to just not let overwhelm me and be all. Can you believe this? Can you believe? Because I tend to go. I'm just as guilty as anybody else seeing some of this stuff. It's like, you think they'd learn by now? Like, come on, get with the program, learn from the past, or you're doomed to repeat it. And we've just seen this over and over again. And it's like, wow, people were terrible. Big surprise. News 11.
I think, and it goes to a question. I promise we're going to work our way up. And yes, I'm definitely going to get into Atari Force and Sergeant Rock. Absolutely, I'm going to do that. But to that point, Robert mentions, this Bleeding Fool report on the Whisper Network. So two things. One, before I get to your question, it's interesting. I take this stuff. I don't know if you read that article. On some level, I read that stuff and it's like, hey, newsflash: people who've been complaining about Comicsgate in public also complained about it in private. And so there's a certain aspect to some of this that it's like, yeah. But it's weird. You read that and it just, I always come back to, it feels like a lot of time being spent on creating no value. So forget about all the rest of the stuff, like who's people are going after or not going after, or what all the rest. It's so much work to go into a group and to research people and figure out who's liking who and kind of track all this stuff and monitor it and for what? Like, what's the outcome? I mean, it's not done wonders for like a Tess Fowler or Alex DeCamby's career. It's not like, they've got that 6-figure job. So what's the point? I don't know. What do you make of all this?
Well, I read the article, which, okay, of course, there's the boys club, there's the girls club, whatever you want to call it, like that kind of attitude, that mentality. There always has been, there always will be. And, but most of the people, I didn't see really any artists in there. As it's usually writers, editors, former of each, letterers, basically people that don't actually have to be, be blunt, truly creative. I honestly, there's so many failed artists that end up as writers or letterers or colorists or inkers, or very few inkers nowadays, but there are inkers that are actually really talented. Some of the best inkers are damn good pencilers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of those things like, okay, Klaus Jansen's art a little rough nowadays, but he's probably 70 years old at this point. This stuff back in the day, on the Legend Dark Knight, the stuff he would do in Legend Dark Knight, Gothic, with Morrison, like really good stuff. It's not like it's just aping Frank Miller. Not really. It's like that was the thing. It's like Frank Miller's style and his style merged on the books, and then you see where Klaus Janson wasn't, and everything like that. You see like that kind of wild, super blocky, almost Play-Doh people that would that Miller would do without Jansen kind of putting a little bit more like structure and rigidness to the figure work. But a lot of these creative types, they get kind of, especially the non-artists, so people that actually that do commissions and everything. Oh, I wrote a couple pages a day, I'm done. I'm going to go and do gossip, whisper, whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And stir trouble up. You don't see very rarely, like I'm talking people that are making art on a regular basis. Like, look at those. Like, if the artists that aren't working on a regular basis, the ones are self-admittedly slow or lazy, or I won't say lazy, but like that kind of, those that aren't busting their butt making trouble. Those are busy, not necessarily. Pretty much. It's like it's one of those things. It's like, those are making trouble. Got nothing better to do. That makes sense. It's like, why don't you take up a painting class or a pottery class? Go and play, Unchained Melody while you're working with pottery. Do something. Do something creative and constructive. Because, oh my God, Richard Meyer, go after his Patreon. Like Teeny Howard, you got something. You don't got nothing else better to do.
It's just
come on.
I would think that people are busy. I don't know. I mean, what strikes me about that, and then the article that I covered today, in the from the Business Insider article, it's like the thing that just keeps coming like a flashing light is like there is not enough money in here to waste your time with this crap. It's just when you're an assistant editor making $30K to $40K a year, living in New York. And the truth is, you're not living in New York at those rates. You're living somewhere in New York, but certainly not Manhattan.
Yonkers,
yeah. Or you got
maybe
like
Long Island. Maybe they might be living in Mastic. I don't know if you ever heard how bad Mastic, Long Island is. It's bad. If people come out of the woods and abduct children, it's pretty bad. It's like a hellscape. Long Island's a weird place. That's where all the serial killers end up. It's so much time, it's so much effort, it's not creating any money, and it's like there's desperate need for there to. I mean, I don't know. I don't get it, but to Robert's question specifically, the second half of it, they may be going to get rid of Snyder. I mean, I think that So if I guess if I'm predicting, I do predict that somebody's going to come after Snyder. I mean, I do. Unfortunately, I think it's definitely going to happen. I don't know if it would be successful or not. He's well established in that group, but unfortunately, I think anybody who gets any kind of big name at this point is going to have people come after them, fairly or unfairly. And unfortunately, I think because it's all blurring together, I think a lot of people will unfairly get tagged with some of this stuff, and it's a shame. It's just a shame that it's going to land there. So. I don't know. Will Snyder go after? Who knows? I think some people made kind of an attempt already a little bit. I think some people have gone after King a little bit in the recent past. So who knows? But I don't know. I don't know where it all goes from here. But I wish it wouldn't. And I wish the market could just decide. I'm the same way, because you're looking at these people. They're not. There are some that will blindly say, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing this because Snyder, he didn't disavow Comicsgate fast enough, or he didn't do the so and so." Make up excuse for whatever. What they're doing is they're trying to bolster their image, their potential for getting a gig, and thus getting gigs for their friends. Because It's not about talent. The joke about it's like somebody told me as a kid, Larry, don't bother working hard. Use people, manipulate them. Be ruthless. Make them think you're their friend. Then when they're no longer useful, slit their throat, throw them in the ditch, or step up top of them while they're reaching up to you. Be brutal, because that's the only way you're gonna get ahead in life, Larry. And that's pretty much how these people are treating the comics. Once you become they'll not necessarily stand by them, but they'll wait in the wings to see which way the wind blows. And then Scott Snyder, he was doing those classes for those people for the writer's workshop. You don't see nobody really getting any other gigs other than one shots. And, he was really helping people out. So what if them people suck? He maybe opened the door and okay, let's see what you can do. It's like, all right, contestant number 2. It's this idea that you have to continually get gigs for people, and it's like if you don't, then you're not a good friend, or you're holding people down, and it's why bother? Like the idea that we have, it's I've never been good. If you say my social skills are just honesty, or just whatever combination of all of it, and just my patience for certain people that kind of I can deal with people. Like I've dealt with people from foreign lands, great and wide, Mongolia, French Canada, the Quebecois. Oh, they come in. They're some of the rude people ever. They're more rude than the actual mainlander French, which I've dealt with, and Iraqis, Jordanians, people from Central America, South, all these people. But then you have these people that come in.
Yeah.
That had this attitude like, oh, I took a writing course in college and I had this, that, whatever. And oh, my friend got me this job and I got this gig and I was tapped by this person. Well, I don't have a steady paying gig because you suck or you don't have no real talent. You're not real. It's unfortunate. It's like where there's certain people, it's like, well, why do they have a gig? It's because they know the right people. At the end of the day, it's who you know, not what you can do. And it's kind of one of those things like, do you continue on doing what you're doing or you do just give up? And it's like, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing, just knowing I can't play that game. I will not play that game because it'd be like one of those things like the rage.
It's a never-ending game. It's once you're in it forever. And I think I mean, comics in general, I think has a problem, and it's a bigger topic. And I would love to have some names here to really go through it, but it is still drawing from way too small a pool. And that's why I find it kind of funny as these articles come out and this kind of renewed focus of like, we are going to push diversity. It's like forgetting about, and by the way, in that video, if you watched that earlier today, a lot of good comments on it, a lot of good feedback, different points of view, which is great. But I think one thing that the world has to kind of wrap its head around is diversity is a big word. It means a lot of different things, but to most people, it means it means race typically, and maybe gender. And that's about it. But diversity is, I mean, the word itself is very diverse. There's a lot of pieces to it. And one of those aspects, which I think is a real problem with comics, is that you've got people who are hired from the exact same space. You get a comic shop and you'll have like 3 or 4 people come from that same comic shop, make it into comics. And how does that happen? Well, because, friends get in, they bring their friends, and that's fine, except it's creating this very shallow pool of people who know each other. And so regardless of the race or the gender of the various people making it in, the actual diversity of the talent that's coming in is very, very thin. It's all coming from the same spots. And that's going to hurt your comics at some point because you do want to have voices from around the planet with different experiences and different backgrounds. It's going to how you will make a stronger product. But if your goal is to say, okay, well, I got to go down this checklist and get exactly these demographics, you're missing the other part of it, the big part of it, which is what are the experiences these people bringing? What kind of backgrounds, what kind of skills are these people bringing? That part gets lost. And if you're going to go for true diversity, which anyone will tell you, you have to focus on that skill set and that experience just as much as the other pieces, if not more, because the other stuff, I mean, it creates a false positive. If you get a very well-rounded racial group in your company that all comes from the exact same city, you've actually reduced things for yourself. Your point of view is a very small bubble, regardless of the backgrounds of the people, because they all came from the same place. You've got to go bigger and deeper than that. It's got to be diversity of experience, diversity of thought. It's got to be bigger than just surface value stuff. But anyway,
that's a problem though, because a lot of these people, like, we're dealing with a generation and a working environment where you can't have there's stories that come up, and it's not just like, oh, it's just a little blurb, but it's a true thing. It's where you can't have like American. 40 years ago, you could have a penthouse Playboy pinup in your toolbox at work, or even in the garage of the body shop. Now you probably can't even have a little American flag in your cubicle at all.
Sure.
You'll upset somebody. It's like, I don't know about that flag. It's an American flag. What's wrong with you? It's offensive to me. That represents a hatred, the bigotry and racism of America. And I'm like, all right, you go to Canada. You go to, hey, you know what? Why don't you go to Iraq? How about you go to Lebanon or Syria, or hell, go to India? Go to India. You know what? Go anywhere. Go to Sentinel Island, south of India. There you go. The people there love you. It's something like if I am one of these. I hate to be that kind of. If you don't like it, leave it. It's like, but this idea of I try not to be like that, but it kind of goes in that territory. But it's where you can't even have a flag, let alone it's like say somebody like. Hey, like I opened my mouth. Oh, you're from the South. Like when I was in Denver, that was the attitude I got because North Carolina passed the bathroom thing. It's where like no
Well, that's something
transsexuals, anybody that was trans, like the no trans bathroom, because it's like, I don't want a 40-year-old man in a wig to be in the bathroom with my 8-year-old daughter. It's like, it's like this idea. It's like, you know what? It's like, I understand that. Do I have any say? No. But it's like this idea. It's like, I have, because I'm from North Carolina, I'm from the South. Oh, you have something to do with that. That's your people that you voted in. It's like, I didn't vote for that turd, But
it's so shallow, and then we'll get. I promise we're going back to comment, but it is. If you go to other countries, you'll find often a very strong nationalistic. I mean, you go down to South America, people are very proud of their country. It's not like it's. I think it's a wake up call for some people. They travel outside this country, and it's like, oh no, actually, a lot of the things that we're rebelling against exist in all these other countries, and they found a way to work it. It's kind of this internal angst. But anyway, we went far astray from the original question. I hope. Honestly, I think these networks and these other things, one, I wish these people would find something better to do that actually brought money and other people into the industry. I think so much of it doesn't add value. And I hope they don't go after Snyder. I hope they don't go after anybody. I hope nobody goes after everybody. Just chill out and make some comics. That'd be nice. But anyway.
I agree. Like, you should have a passion, like you said, like South American countries. Do not trash talk Brazil.
Oh, no.
Brazil is one of the Brazil and the Brazilian people. If they could Freddy Krueger through the phone, they would. Like, if you go to sleep, you better not think bad about Brazil. So if that passion for their patriotism for their country, or whatever you want to call it,
sure,
that right there, if that could be translated, look how many great artists can come out of Brazil. But that's what's so weird. You got all these great, like, kind of, these studios and stuff, like the Ed Benes studio and a couple of other people. Why aren't they working on some of these books? Like, if you're going to get a
man, I don't know. Yeah.
That's like you look at, like, a lot of people, for I can't, people can easily like throw away somebody like Gail Simone. But I remember reading the Agent X back in the day, quite digging it. That was the Udon Studios illustrated one, and even Birds of Prey, and even like Villains United and Secret Six. I enjoyed that. Past that, not so much. And the stuff that she has done, I do not agree with. I do not endorse, and I frankly just ignore her because, like, what's the point? Like, I don't have no, I gotta keep up with what Gail's working on. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't care. It hasn't done anything interesting. Whenever was it 10 years? That's when Secret Six ended, or something like that. Like 8 years.
Well, I mean, and everybody has runs. People have good comics, bad comics, and nobody should be upset nobody should be embarrassed to say they don't like something because their tastes change, or maybe the artist changes, or who knows. But you hit upon something I want to get to in a minute. But I want to, before we lose some of these questions here, so don't let me forget. We want to talk about some artists in other countries, because there are some really cool pockets of talent that just are not being tapped for no apparent reason. And I don't think it's a price issue, but. So Atomic Count says, what's your spoiler-free take on death metal? I don't know if you've read it all, Larry. Have you checked out death metal, or have you?
I read the first series when it was on Comixology. Had a sale where it was like $4 or something for the entire for the first one, for the first series. I actually love the first series for what it was, which is very shameless 90s style comics, like in the same vein of like Age of Apocalypse, which kind of they did with Flashpoint in some regards, which is very much like, hey, it's DC's take on a 90s comic crossover, kind of Age of Apocalypse-ish. Metal almost felt like also a send up to send up, you can almost consider it rip off too, because design wise, but whatever, of the Dark Judges from 2000 AD. And some of this stuff was a little too goofy for my liking, but I was like, I just went with it. It's fun. It's dumb. It's dumb comics. You're not getting, a breakdown. How would you call it?
You're not getting Heroes in Crisis. You're getting.
You're not getting. Oh yeah, thank God you didn't get Heroes in Crisis, but you're not getting like a Watchmen deconstruction. You're getting a dumb. It's like dumber than a Michael Bay film. It's like if honestly it is. It's like Baby Dark Side and the giant bat gods and stuff, and it's like. It's so dumb. It's like, hey, what's popular? More popular than Superman. Batman. Let's do Batman everything. A Batman Flash. Batman Aquaman. A Batman Wonder Woman. It's like, it's so it's almost like Star Wars. It's no, sorry, Star Wars. Spaceballs. Spaceballs the flamethrower. Spaceballs the color.
Yeah.
It's like
it is. I agree with you. I think Metal had that. So I've been wrapping my head around giving a spoiler-free review. Sorry. I think that the first one had that fun kind of summer movie kind of feel to it, wacky concepts. I think Snyder always tries to put in some concepts into the book that are more. I would say he's trying to wander into kind of Grant Morrison type territory. I hate to peg him with it, but more that kind of thoughtful. But at the same time, he does bombastic kind of crazy action well, and I think when he leans into that, he gets something fun out of it. This second series, it's a little bit too early to kind of say where it landed. Without giving anything away, I think we're 2 issues in, and I would have expected things to have moved along a little bit quicker than this. The second issue didn't make as much progress as I thought it would, and it's okay. I mean, it's very much but I'll put it this way: I think in reading it, it becomes very easy if it's not your thing to say, well, this probably isn't going to impact the DC universe in a massive way. Meaning, if I'm enjoying The Flash or I'm enjoying Aquaman, I can continue to do that. The question mark for me is going to come up with. Snyder has said all things are connected, and he's going to try and tie all this stuff together, including Doomsday Clock and Heroes in Crisis and all the stuff that came and First Metal and all the rest into one neat package, what Bendis is doing and all the rest. And I just don't see how that's humanly possible with kind of this different approach. And I made this point, I can't remember if the videos actually come out or not come out. I don't no longer remember these things, but you take a character like Wally West and you look at that strange progression. And I'm not going to give spoilers for Death Metal, but I will give spoilers for Heroes in Crisis in that era. So if you haven't read those, dip out now. But Wally, had been MIA from the New 52. They do Rebirth. They bring him back. It's a happy, joyous moment. He's here. And then they kind of have Wally have some adventures and everything else. And he's got some health problems and the Titans book and, some issues there. And then then we learn in Heroes in Crisis, he's actually quite depressed because of his family and things that have been missing from him and what he went through. And then he snaps and he, kills a bunch of people. And then Scott Lobdell tries to reclaim it a little bit and kind of give some redemption and flash forward. He gets the Dr. Manhattan powers. And I won't get into Death Metal, but my question is, what is the plan for Wally West? Meaning, you can't tell me with that course of events that this was a coherent plan that anyone had. For better or worse, I'm not a huge fan of what Bendis is doing over on Superman, but it does feel like Bendis has a plan, at least in mind, for where Superman is going. I may not like that plan, but there's a plan. Whereas with Wally, it feels like I have no idea what the plan is there. People are stuff's shooting out in every other direction. And it's like we did something and then we reversed it. And then we did something worse. And then, we have to quickly patch that up. And it's like, it feels like of the most disjointed schizophrenic comic ever. And so to answer this question, the spoiler-free take on Death Metal, it's making a lot of promises. I see no way it can deliver on, but hey, we'll see. I wish you could see a plan in more of the characters. Whether you like it or not, you could see at least there was some kind of coherent plan. But what I just described with Wally was just like all over the freaking place.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that they get so ambitious. It's like, what, aim small. It's like someone had once tweeted at me, under promise and over deliver. Back in July 5th of 2018. But whatever. Yeah. Damn chicken book. But but no, it's seriously, it's this idea of coming up with something, such a huge idea. It's like, I'm going to tie all this together, and that sounds great, but something as big as that, and also it's like something like Doomsday Clock and the whole Watchmen stuff. And I understand it's like, they do not want to let that potential cash. I don't know the sales on before Watchmen were. I don't know the sales. I think Doomsday Clock was doing good, I guess, or probably did great no matter what. But
Doomsday Clock did okay. It did do good sales. The delays hurt it a bit, I think. Before Watchmen started out stronger than it ended. I mean, there's money in those hills. I think that you can. Like you should have and this used to be what the editor-in-chief did or editors do, they'd have a plan for these characters. So you didn't get these kind of just all over the place renditions. And what I just described with Wally was, I think, the course of what, 2.5 years. I mean, that. What are you doing? I mean, seriously, what in the world are you doing? The buildup of turning Madeline Pryor into the Goblin Queen took, I mean, a long ass time.
You're talking about, okay, Scott left after Dark Phoenix. Well, after Dark Phoenix, after Days of Future Past.
Sure, finds Madeline.
Madeline shows up, when he's in Alaska doing his little flying and everything like that. She's doing she's flying, and oh man, exactly like Jean. Because of the whole, Mr. Sinister clone and all that stuff. And so she doesn't turn until it's like issue 220. That was because it was that Inferno takes place before Fall of the Mutants, correct?
No, after. No,
after. Yeah. That's right, because she's in the Outback too.
Yeah, they're up in Australia. I mean,
that's right. So we're talking 250 around that, between something like that. It's somewhere in the two. Like you're talking about 80 to 100 issues worth of build up and character growth, and then with her pregnancy, and then the birth of Nathan Cable.
Years. I mean,
you're talking a long time, but then nothing like it. Just like what you said about what Cena Grace was saying, and these other writers, don't get attached to these books. Don't do the subplots.
Yeah, I guess.
And it's this idea. It's like where it's like they don't self-promote. That's why we got but your PR marketing firm. PR marketing is doing nothing. Let me do a couple podcasts. I know some people. No, we'll fire you. It's like that kind of the attitude. It's like they don't want to be promoted. They don't want you to go into business for yourself. It's kind of that. I almost put it in that Sandy Colora category. It's like where he's like, I'm gonna go do a Batman fan film that looks better than the best live, in my opinion, best live action Batman ever. Costume, look, with Predator and Alien as Batman. It's one of those Dark Horse crossovers. Well, unfortunately, now it's gonna be Marvel crossover.
By the way, so pause on that for a second. So I was surprised to learn a lot of people don't know that exists. There is a fan film out there, but did they pull it from YouTube? Do you know?
No, I'm pretty sure right now, if you look at them on YouTube, Batman Dead End. It's like an 8-minute fan film directed by Sandy Colora, who worked with Stan Winston Studios, and he has straight up Batman versus the Joker. Then also, which the Joker is the guy passed away. It was what was it? Boner from Growing Pains. Koenig. Chekhov's son.
Yes.
And he's in there, and then you got Alien, you got a Xenomorph, you got a Predator, and the costume is like this Alex Ross looking Batman with even the white eye contacts and everything like that, which is kind of creepy looking, which works. Mm-hmm. But this kind of is he human? We don't know, But it's really good. But it's one of those things like he showed off, and I like to in my head canon for the whole thing, for the way Hollywood works. Like, instead of saying we got to get this guy on, do a project. Yeah. It's like he showed off, made us look bad, bury him. He did like some film like after that, but it was some kind of sci-fi film, but it wasn't like do a superhero thing, do like something. Like give him a little bit of money, let him go and try to replicate it, and see if he could replicate it. Good, gone. Go ahead, do a big movie. I
think in general, and I think not to throw stuff in. I don't just send people this direction, but it's the same thing. I know I've talked about on Twitter before. There's this guy Axel Braun who does porn, but his costuming often looks way superior to. Now I will say it is a kind of a different experience in the movie than the posters he does. He's world class with the posters and the marketing. I think, it doesn't always translate in the movie the same way. So, but the key is that there's, it's possible to do some of these very realistic, very comic centered things. And a lot of people who are outside the industry are doing it way better than the studios paid to do it. But it's a crazy thing.
It's a problem having work by committee. It works great in Japan for a society that works as a unit. We're like, hey, there's people, like you were talking about the masks and everything like that. They take care of, they work in unison. How do you expect, a island nation, Japan, was able to basically take the entire Pacific? It's it's like kind of dark times and unfortunateness that happened. But they were kicking ass because they had their act together, and they still do. I mean, everybody say Japanese junk when it came to electronics, but dear Lord, they still make some of the best stuff.
Yeah, they figured it out. I mean,
But it's this idea that, like now it's like American committees, you got to have, somebody come in, okay, this, okay, that. Oh, that's why I don't like the MCU costumes. They look, to me, they look terrible. They look over designed. They look so samey.
They
Like
do. They do.
they had to mess with that classic Ditko design of Spider-Man. Add the X like chevrons and this, that. I'm like, what have you done to Spider-Man? What have you done to that classic?
Well,
he's like,
it's
my
true.
boy.
It's true. And I promise we'll get to the question on the screen. But I was talking to somebody else about this the other day. I want to test the people in this chat. If you have the same experience I do, where if you walk into a shop or either a comic shop or grocery stores where I heard it last, and they're playing the classic Superman theme from the Christopher Reeves movie, you immediately recognize it. You know where it is. You have good memories. Granted, if you watch the movie, parts of it do not hold up or have not aged as well, but it's a good memory. And I feel the same about Batman, and some of these films are just classics kind of, in my head, no matter what kind of crazy stuff Danny Elfman was doing and Tim Burton. But when you hit that X-Men era, a lot of people have very fond memories of the Bryan Singer kind of first movie of X-Men. But if you go back and watch it today, there's some clunky as hell stuff in there. I mean, from the costume, sure.
It's a TV movie, basically.
I mean, the Storm's line of, what happens to a toad when it's hit by lightning, the same thing that happens to everybody else. It's like, that is an awful line. I'm sorry.
Joss Whedon, baby. That's Joss Whedon's Punch Up.
But no, this is all pre-Joss Whedon. This was
no. He did Punch Up for that movie, though.
Oh, seriously?
It was written by David Hayter, who also wrote the Paul Greengrass version of Watchmen. It was set 2000, like post-Iraq War kind of Watchmen. David Hayter, who also voiced Solid Snake. He also voiced Captain America in Spider-Man the Animated Series. He also was in Guyver 2 Dark Hero, probably one of the better sequels ever. But he wrote the script, and they had Joss Whedon because it was a Fox feature, because he also Joss Whedon also punched up the script. I think he worked on the script for Twister. That whole what's in that 5 drops the finger of God. That's Joss Whedon. The stuff with Alien Resurrection, perfect example.
Well, good God! So if Whedon was responsible for that terrible Toad line, that's a whole new reason for me to dislike Whedon and his giant head. But anyway, okay. So if you were, I'll do you to it. If you're a king of the comic industry for a day, what would be your first 3? So number 1, all the people on top lose their jobs. Sorry, I think the people who are running the shows are doing a terrible job. So they're gone. I would actually boost a lot more money into editorial and try and hire good editorial. Some people certainly keep their jobs in editorial, a lot of new people coming into editorial. And I would say, we're going to start managing this line like a product line. We're going to bring in some people from outside of comics who know how to manage a product line. And we're going to focus on, building up numbers, going into new channels, getting marketing worked out, all this boring stuff that doesn't sound like good comics, but that's what will hold up the industry. And then I think the last thing I would do is I would make it worthwhile for some of these comic artists who are still extremely good at their jobs, ready to do work, to be able to pay them for more than just a cover. I would get Brett Booth on the X-Men for sure. I would get him on the X-Men. I would get Alex Ross to do some one-shots, the interiors too. I would get Art Adams to do something. I would get some of these guys who are really top artists and get the money in the mix to actually pay them to do their work, whether it's a one-shot or a limited series or ongoing, depending on what they could do. I think there's some really talented creators who have been, I don't want to say blacklisted, but almost put aside because they are seen to appeal to, quote unquote, the old crowd of comic fans. And I will tell you, somebody who's never picked up a comic before, it doesn't matter what group, what place they're coming from, if they're taking a look at an Alex Ross, we know Alex Ross would sell comics to all kinds of people because they put them on covers. We know, you take one look at Brett Booth, says he's got an amazing, energetic style that would work great for the X-Men. So put him on there. I would get rid of the people on the top, which would free up a bunch of money. I would put some more money in an editorial and bring in some outside people from comics to manage products. Imagine it like a product line, like a mature business. And then I would get some of these really top-level artists and find ways to incent them to actually do the full book. That's what I would do. What about you, Larry?
I actually pretty much would rip you off your idea-wise. Get rid of these people at the top that are collecting way too big a paycheck. Bring in people that can actually, okay, you have Chris Claremont on the payroll. put him on a book. Doesn't have to be X-Men. Maybe do an X-Men miniseries or something. Or hell, probably honestly, like let's see what he could come up with. Like that kind of thing. Let's see what he would like to do because everybody thinks X-Men, X-Men, X-Men. But if he wants to do X-Men, if he wants to do something else, let's just let him come out and play. You got him on the. It's like you got him on the team. Let him come out and play. I agree with this same idea that you do. Have these big name artists. Have Alex Ross. I don't know if you've ever seen Alex Ross's pencil sketches.
Oh, they're great.
I would say go a Steve Rude level, painted cover with his penciled illustrations on the inside, inked by someone, I don't know who, but get a good inker, get a good colorist, and boom, there you go. Like where something like the art could be on a, make that like an annual or something, like Alex Ross annual of whatever. And that the annual will be a lead into one, like say you say event, but maybe like a, like the big, culmination in one way or another, like they used to do back in the day, where it wasn't like 50 stop the tie-ins. That'd be another thing right there. Yep. So that'd be basically about 3. Like it would be the stop the tie-ins, because the tie-ins, I have never like, oh, I gotta go get this tie-in to whatever Civil War. It's like, who wants that? It's like I don't see the point in that. If I want to read the main story, it's like with even though Comixology, like I said, had that sale on Death Metal. Dark Knight's Metal. The metal book. Original they metal. Had the tie-ins for the same price. I go buy that. They ain't part of the core story. I'm not going to bother reading it. Well, you got to read this over here. I'm like, you'll give me basically a summary of what happened over there. Yeah. You're not going to for more information, you have to read this over here. It's like, we're not going to tell you. It's like, it's kind of what happened to the Grant Morrison Batman run when, like you think it's going to, Batman's going to die in his actual book, but no, you got to read like Final Crisis. Yeah. to find out, like, oh, thanks. I feel ripped off and cheated. This is a run I was very iffy on to begin with. I was like,
he gets to die twice. That was a weird moment, and not a lot of people remember. That was a weird moment in Batman history.
Well, same thing with the prose issue with the John Van Fleet art. Yeah, and I kind of was digging that seems like such like a Scott Snyder idea now, but the Man Bat League of Assassin Ninjas, which are very dumb, but that seems like a very Scott Snyder idea. But then I like the Batman of Many Nations. Yeah. I like some of that stuff. Like some of it worked really well, but it's like this is what happens when you have seemingly no editorial control over Grant Morrison. It's like I don't really care for like Unchained Grant Morrison. Like you need to be reined in a little bit. Have a little bit of control.
Oh, for sure. But I think there's a bunch of. I did that Punisher Return to Big Nothing review, and there's a bunch of little books out there like that are one shots, but they're 60-page or so, a little bit less than that. Really good stories, would translate great to the movies. So great. There's some IP that feeds out. Why not go find Jim Starlin and Ron Lim and say, do a killer, 50-page Silver Surfer story. We're going to put it out in hardcover, and then 4 months later, soft cover. And we want you to do 2 of those a year. And Chris Claremont, we're going to have you do 1 story with Art Adams and 1 story with
Brent Anderson.
Yeah, exactly. Why not just, 2 of those a year, and just start putting out this stuff. If you can't get them on a monthly book for whatever reason, start putting out more of these. They would sell, it would fit the market, and it would be a hell of a lot of an easier way to get to this quote unquote new market than the approach they're using now. Just start creating more of these books. I think, and by the way, thank you, Ben, for the question. And I think that on YouTube and on Twitter, we often go back to the same things. I mean, I will go back to Art Adams and Chris Claremont or the Dark Phoenix saga, like time and time again. It's a great book. But there are a ton of other things out there. The Mobius Silver Surfer story that I've referenced in the past, the Nick Fury limited series from Epic, I think, from the late 80s was incredible. There's a lot of really cool books out there being produced. And what's really recognizable about now is I think the last book they produced in this format was that Rage of Ultron by Rick Remender on his way out. And I mean, these things they don't make them anymore, and they're incredible. There's a lot of really cool things you can do there.
The Marvel graphic novel method, that's what it should be.
Yeah,
which is that
exactly.
You had these comics, New Mutants, you had She-Hulk, which is honestly, my favorite She-Hulk comic is the She-Hulk graphic novel.
That was a great one. A great one. Most people don't know that exists, though.
Well, that's the thing. It's like these things, they should not be, not talked about. Like that. the European style, which basically what those graphic novels were, which is like 60 roughly pages. There are solid stories, amazing art, beautiful presentation. It's not really matte paper. It's not super gloss. It's that heavy stock. It is, you almost say archival, but it's pure comic goodness. And you had, you had some weird stuff. Like you had what was the name of it? Dreadstar, Jim Starlin. Which everything death. Like somebody pointed out, like everything Jim Starlin does is surround death, this, death, that. It's like death, and he's like got cats in it and everything, like cat people or whatever.
It's an obvious. I think this comment just publish these European style albums, get the veterans creators to come on, put them out there, put some money into it again, and own this market. Have the Marvel direct market. Hey, you could do the same thing for DC. Don't get me wrong, but I think that there's an easy approach. And then I think with the finances, you got to give some of these creators more of the back end so that there's incentive to do it. But just start putting out stuff like this. It would be welcomed. I mean, we're moving that way anyway. And I mean, you might as well. I think it would be great stuff.
It'd be also easier to present and much more, and to me, much more appealing than, if Marvel went like a graphic novel, a manga size format, like black and white, digest sized, I don't even know what kind of artist they could get. They could do it fast enough to put that out on a semi-regular basis. Like the people I think American readers in some way are spoiled because they're reading already translated material and sometimes it's decades old. You know, and Devilman's great, and that's about 40 years old at this point.
This stuff's aging. It's I don't know.
Some of it lasts a lot, but it's one of those. It's something that lasts a long time. It has a lot of legs to it. It doesn't feel that old, but then you have that European style, that the old Marvel graphic novel method, 60 pages, or even the Marvel super specials, which were the floppy variant. They were the staple, like almost like not tabloid size, not that big, but like magazine sized. And they were you had a lot of them were the movie adaptations. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Blade Runner, Buckaroo Banzai, Dune, and like Xanadu, the Newton-John, and this idea of one contained story with a beginning, middle, and an end, not to be continued in this. And it's like this idea that you could pick it back up. Hey, this Chris Claremont, Bill Sienkiewicz, New Mutants, hardcover collection, 60, 90 pages of another untold tale of the New Mutants. Sign me up. You got my money. You got my $15-20 instantly. I'll buy that right off the bat.
You might as well. I mean, throw it out there. It could be a great line. It's a way to kind of, pay homage to stuff that's going on, to remember your continuity, put something out safe. I don't know. There's some, you see up on the screen here, there's some great stories out there, and I'll try and give more focus to them. I've got them all. I'm actually staring at a bunch of these on my shelf right now, and there are some amazing stories out there, and they don't come up very often. We often go to kind of that Jim Lee run on the X-Men, or Todd McFarlane on Spider-Man. Great stuff too, but there are some really cool kind of graphic novels out there that are kind of original, really cool stuff. And it goes to kind of this question from Everett Todd: why don't more of the big studios reprint back catalog and deluxe hardcovers? The only thing I can tell you here is that, as much as we don't talk about these things, as I've met up with, I can't tell you the amount of times I've recommended Punisher Big Nothing to staff at Marvel who have no idea that this thing existed. And I point them to it like, this is a quintessential Punisher story. This is really kind of nails the character and a lot of his backstories. You should go pick it up. And for whatever reason, a lot of these comics, they're gone in people's minds, and it's happening faster and faster. The big stuff like the Dark Phoenix saga, people remember the Frank Miller on Daredevil, kind of the really big ones. But more and more, the big studios are forgetting that these things even exist. And in a lot of cases, it's almost free money. There's great runs and great stories. I mean, that She-Hulk graphic novel that you mentioned would be easy money to just reprint that out. The Dazzler one would be good. I
don't know about that, man. That's the one where where the not Frank Sinatra, who's at a launch in a thing, tries he fakes that she hit him. Then he tries to molest her. Then he breaks into her apartment, tries to rape her, and eventually at the end of the story, by the end, she becomes like, I love him now, and then he dies of a heart attack. Spoiler. I'm sorry, good folks.
It's a story for our times.
I hate that comic so much. I was like, hey, Frank Springer. I love the Bill Sienkiewicz cover. I'm like, this is gonna be great. And I'm like, this is like, if the fact that like where like the guy was like manipulating her the whole time, and it's kind of like she gets revenge, kind of like a Miss 45 level, some kind of Abel Ferrara deal. But no, it's this. I love my rapist now. Like with that kind of.
In fairness, it was a weird time. I mean, you had Carol marrying her son around that same time period. So I mean,
and computer was both involved with both projects. That's
I mean, there's some weird stuff going on, but it just, I guess, okay, I'll back away from it a little bit.
There's a perfect song for both that and the Avengers 200. The whole Carol marrying her son, Calvin Harris. It was acceptable in the 80s. That's a perfect. That
stuff does not age well. You're right about this. So now I'm remembering more of Dazzle here, but the point holds. I think they should do that, and they should go into some of these runs and make some hardcovers out of it. But it takes somebody who really understands the line. I increasingly think a lot of people who work at the companies just don't have any real interest in their back catalog, and don't they're too busy focused on. We got to grow the market by doing something new. And I think they're forgetting that a lot of these comics would grow just fine into new markets. But, you got to show people where they are. I think I made this point earlier that if your goal at a comic company is to grow the market, you're going to go find a new market, you can get new people into comics. Most retailers will be all over that. Yes, we want more customers too. Yes, absolutely. So the question then becomes, well, how are you going to get these new people to discover comic shop exists and discover comic books are cool and get them in there? And if the answer is silence, which is usually the case, or, well, we're going to send you posters so you can market this stuff in your shop. Okay, the flaw in that reasoning is that these people are not coming into the shop today. So if you spend your money advertising in, say, Diamond Previews or a comic book shop, you are reaching absolutely zero of your new audience. If you're waiting to do it at a Comic-Con, you're advertising to people who are already on board. You will get no new audience. You have to advertise where you're not, where they don't know the comics exist. If you're going to break open the Latin market, as I've heard it from time to time, then you're going to have to go on Univision. You're going to have to go to some of these locations that's speaking to that market and advertise your wares there. You can't go to San Diego Comic-Con and go, hey, people who paid for the ticket and stood in line and probably had this for several months. Here's a new comic we're doing for you. Those people aren't there. That's kind of the point. Anyway, I talked myself hoarse.
About that.
And Larry left. Here's Larry. Hey.
A thunderstorm came up and disconnected me real quick. So that was summertime in the South.
I was just ranting away. Anyway, no problem. Hey, what do you, this question, do you think the international appeal of U.S. superhero comics will change due to the focus on U.S. internal politics, something you do not see? Yeah, I do. I think that the challenge is the international appeal of the U.S. comic market is really based on these big adventures and these big moments, these larger than life things. There's a style to it. And so I can guarantee you that comics, and I'm not saying they're aiming for it, but if the comics is going to be, American superheroes stay at home to protect the world from COVID, I don't know that, customers in, Germany are going to go for that. I don't know if these new markets are going to be super interested in hearing that kind of, American culture inside baseball. I may be wrong, but the things where you see the money drawn to is all around the kind of the big, larger than life adventures. And you're absolutely right. European comics and manga at least understand that the indies that get produced are very, there's certainly indie manga that is very Japanese centric, where you have to understand the trains and the society and the system. And it's very, very inside baseball for people who live there. But the stuff that goes mainstream, the stuff that Shonen Jump produces, it's built to be mass market. Same thing is true with Europe. And I think, DC with Death Metal, it's intended to be kind of mass market. We'll see if it lands, but that's how it's intended. Empire as a storyline, probably is fairly mass market. But as you get into these runs that are very myopic, and I fear this upcoming election because I feel like the comics can't help themselves and they'll go all in on that stuff. That turns people away. So you have to make it accessible to people who have no interest in whatever's going on in your own country.
I really do think there's an issue because I think the appeal, what I've seen and heard from interviews with a lot of mostly British artists that when they were exposed to American comics, most of it was like, the Stan Jack, the 70s of that, that kind of deal where, seeing like they're coming from, these coal mining towns or some city in, somewhere in the UK, and this, seeing New York, Spider-Man swinging around New York, or Silver Surfer, gliding around the spaceways, that John Buscema or Conan, that kind of deal. But mainly the American, kind of that mindset of comics, that American Americana style of comics, where it was kind of two-fisted action, in your face, that kind of stuff, where, just kind of earnest, corny. You can look at it that way, almost very corny. Like you look at Spider-Man, it's a very corny character.
Sure.
Well, he's gonna be it could get really deep and really kind of disturbing at times, and very you could test his metal, like with the amazing Kraven's Last Hunt. I was blanking on I was blanking on it for a second, but Kraven's Last Hunt and other comics of that nature. And like God Loves Man Kills Me, you look at some of that early X-Men stuff, and even like some of the other Claremont books, that's probably one of the heaviest books he had ever done with X-Men. Even heavier than Life, Death 1 and 2 with Barry Windsor Smith. But you're looking at American comics today in general, there are a few, like one I would stand by is Hawkman by Venditti and Brian Hitch, which is like a comic I could see that collected and selling well pretty much anywhere, because it's two-fisted, action-packed, time-space adventure through big and small, and connecting with your past, and kind of, coming to terms with it all. It's a wonderfully crafted comic.
Yep.
But something like, to be brutally honest, I saw somebody comment earlier about, what do you think about Hickman's X-Men? I'm not. I don't think that'll have the legs that like a Claremont or even a Morrison X-Men will, unfortunately, because it doesn't. To me, there's no hook. Well, and the same thing with these very topical political topics in American comics. Outside of that, those that want to zing somebody, want to roast them a little bit for whatever. Yep. I don't see it have legs. I really don't.
It's got to be more timeless. If it's going to survive, multiple decades, it's got to be timeless enough that it doesn't mean you stay completely away from current events, but you got to do it in such a way that 10 years from now it doesn't look completely cringeworthy, because it's referencing stuff that just feels very, very dated. It's you see this a lot in movies and other things where the references just feel dated. I think that we mentioned earlier that Christopher Reeve's Superman definitely has some aspects to it that are, there's an older movie, but it also, there's a timeless quality to it. You can watch it. It doesn't feel completely like it's screwed up. If you fast forward a little bit, the X-Men movie, there's, fond memories some people have of it, but there's some very 90s dialogue in there. It feels like the times. And I think, it fits this question is, where do you guys think Hickman is going to the current X-Men run? I don't think it will be I don't think it'll be remembered as fondly as Claremont. That's a very tall bar, but I do think it's got so much. The problem is it's going to be very hard to unpack everything that's going on with all the different tie-ins, all the different run, everything that he's going with. It's going to be tricky for somebody, say 20 years from now, to pick that up and kind of figure out what's going on. As to this exact question, though, it's totally going to it's a throuple. That's what's going on there. They're all having sex. That's what's happening.
It's this idea that you remember how they used to do the whole teasing, titillation, a little bit here and there. Oh, will they? Won't they? It's like, nah. It's just polyamory everywhere. Oh, death. That joke that all X-Men die and all this and that, and they come back. Oh, guess what? It ain't a joke. It's just it's not a it's not a flaw. It's a feature or something like that. What's the term? Yeah, it's a feature now. Yeah. It's this idea that we're going to just do that, and most like with 3/4 of the way through the House of X, Powers of X stuff, whatever, I just gave up. I said, I don't like where this is going. I don't like Sinister. This whole, to me, Sinister should be when the cartoon from the 90s took Sinister seriously, and nobody's taking Sinister seriously. they turn to it's Miss Sinister now. Ha ha! See what we did there? It's like, oh, come on! Can I get just a actual Sinister that isn't sniveling? That isn't?
I'm with you. Yeah, a lot of people had problems with that moment. I enjoyed the initial run, but it almost read to me like the challenge was that there's been X-Men storylines in the past where they've gone into the future, they've shown alternate realities, and they can do crazy stuff, and then they come back and they continue forward with the main run, and maybe the characters learn something from that possible future. And in this one, we had this House of X powers of 10, and crazy stuff's going on, but then we now we're living in that reality, and increasingly it's a huge concept, and it's got a lot of splitting plates, a lot of different creators on it, and the ability to land that is to me it's going to be very tricky. I don't see how this lands in a good, elegant way, but I don't know. We'll see. I think this the Ten of Swords is going to be the big kind of test to see how well all the tie-ins can pull together, and is it going to tell a coherent story and everything else. I mean, I don't know. That's going to be quite a challenge, I think.
I also think they went and like, hey, let's just do every spinoff possible, and then not even really commit to it.
Oh yeah, way too much. Too much too soon. It's crazy. I apologize, by the way. There is so many questions. The chat is very active, so I'm sure I'm missing a ton of stuff here. I'm failing on the answer your questions promise here. So we'll get we'll get there. We'll catch up. It's nice talking to you again here, Larry, and just it's always a fun back and forth.
Yeah, same here. I see that there's some Paul Jenkins love in the chat, and I was thinking about. I actually was looking at before the whole Jaylee hullabaloo, but the Sentry, where they kind of pulled the whole. It was a character that was kind of. I was like, who believes this? I remember going to a comic shop and telling somebody, I was like, do they think people believe this?
No, for sure. Hey, actually, somebody made a comment that is here. So this one, the endless analyzing on minuscule details. How is a kid going to be attracted to that? That's a good point, actually, because it is. So first off, I think we can't make people be who they're not. And if you get involved in comics, you commit a lot to your life, you read all these issues, you go through the continuity, you go and go and go and go, then eventually, it's natural. You are going to analyze the minuscule details. You are going to get into all those things because you have an attachment to those characters. That's natural and normal. And so you can't disregard that. You can't shove that to the side. You can't tell people, hey, just stop doing that, or you're thinking about it too much. That doesn't work. But the the other half of that promise is you still have to make it accessible for people to come in and actually, pick up the comic and find something that they can attach to. New readers are not going to want to go into all these minuscule details. You got to hook them first, long before they get into all this analysis. They have to find something accessible. And the challenge is the accessibility really seems in many cases to be missing from comics. And every now and then I think people get it right. I do think that Marvel got the accessibility right with Miss Marvel when it first came out. It was a book that if you were new to comics, you hadn't read comics, you pick that up, you get a coherent story. There's a little bit of that, what is this Inhumans? She's in an egg stuff. I don't get it, but there is, it was still fairly accessible. You could pick it up and you can run with it. And then they seemed, as they relaunched it, they seemed to overcomplicate their own book, where you can balance continuity and accessibility at the same time. I do think Claremont had very, very dense stories, lots of details, lots of subplots, lots of things that referred to previous issues and everything else. However, I know, because I did it myself and lots of other people came into comics during that period, the books were still written in such a way that you could pick it up, you could just enjoy it for what it was, you could get hooked, and then you get into all the details. And I think both have to be true. Both have to live in harmony and in balance. It can't just be one or the other. It can't be stop looking about the details or, close off the accessibility right. You got to be able to bring them both together. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree fully, because you got a lot of these people that, like X-Men, like Hickman's X-Men. If somebody said, would you recommend that for a first-time X-Men reader? Oh, no.
It'd be tough for a first-time reader. Absolutely. You'd lose a lot.
Oh, they died? Oh, wait, they're back a lot. What's Krakoa? What's this? What's that? It's like, and they're like, well, go to Wikipedia. They don't answer your questions. Like, nobody wants to do that. Like,
you can't send people to Wikipedia. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like here's the iReader with Wikipedia preloaded or something like that.
Yeah.
Here's your hardcover of Hickman's X-Men. It's like for me, like if I were to go to like one of those, hey, what X-Men would you start out with? And I'm like, well, God Loves Man Kills. That's the prime, honestly, X-Men. Like that right there kind of boils down like heroes, villains. Not all heroes, not all villains. There's things are not as simple and things are very complex in the X-Men universe, and it is a very gut-wrenching tale. And it's one of those things like if you could stomach this, you could pretty much take anything else and then work your way backwards or forwards. And it's like, it's like, well, you got to start from ground zero. I'm like, read those original X-Men, the whole Stanley, Kirby, the what was Warner Roth, all that. Pretty much up until the reruns issues, the reprints. They're not even the Steranko and early Barry Windsor Smith stuff. It's not that great. It's unfortunate.
It'd be an interesting. I'll get prepared. Maybe in the future we'll do at least one comment, like where to jump in or where some good places to get going with some comics. That'd be a fun thing to do. I hope I answered that guy's question. Although I think he took off. I think he was irritated with all of us and going into the details. I think he may have left. But it's a good point. I think it's worth listening to the criticism and.
I just think I don't like Roy Thomas as much as I thought I did. It's one of those. It's like I like the idea of Roy Thomas more than I actually like the execution of Roy Thomas's work.
Yeah. Well.
I like that kind of throwback nostalgic Americana with the the invaders and all that good stuff and the JSA kind of deal, but whatever.
I think that I think that a bunch of comic companies are missing it a little bit right now, and that if you're an indie book or indie publisher or somebody, you're trying to put out a book, and this is what Marvel or DC should do, at least have one or two books. They're going to be really clean, really easy to get into, pure escapism. I think that's why Deceased is doing as well as it is, because there is a virus in that book too, but it's not like the thing that's keeping us all home and annoying everybody. There's not a political election looming in there. It's just a very escapist story. And I think that's why it plays well, is that people do need something to grip onto. Not all the comics, not 100% of them, just some, where you can kind of free yourself up and read something that's not reminding you of the crap show that's going on outside your window. I think that's got to be at least a priority somewhere. And I just don't see a lot of people aiming for it. But anyway, to this point, I do think that Hickman X-Men, this is where we'll see how it ages. I don't know if that kind of sinking feeling, or the X-Men actually villains and what's going on. I mean, how well that plays in the next year it's going to be interesting to watch. It may not play as well as people think.
I don't think so either. But like you said, the escapism in comics, I think that is one of the biggest things missing from comics in general, the escapism. The one comic show I'd done, it was at a church. And they overbooked, and I was in a church. I was in front of the chapel itself. Behind me is glass doors and glass windows, with glass wall, and you could see the pews and the altar and everything like that. So everybody was talking to me. Was behind me is a 10-foot tall statue of Jesus. So it was kind of like awkward to like looking at my comics. I'm like, I didn't know. I thought it was gonna be like the refreshment hall, the fellowship hall next door, not not with Jesus looking over my shoulder. This is in Denver. But the guy's like, "So what's your story mean?" And I'm like, "It's just entertainment. It's escapism. It's just pure entertainment. That's my goal. It's got to be more than that. It doesn't have to be." And like they got upset and they walked away. And it's like, okay, whatever.
I totally agree. This question: have you ever considered doing spotlight videos on writers, artists, editors? Yes, and I think starting next week you're going to see these. Absolutely. And where I'm trying to do is get people who can actually come in from the industry to comment on some of these people, because what I really want to do is try and pick some people who haven't been gone over to death. There's a lot of people, especially in that editor area, who have done some amazing work, who are really responsible for some great comics, who have some interesting stories to tell. And like I've kind of said or warned about in previous videos, if you're coming into this and you don't want to hear anybody from either the left or the right, I'm going to bring in some names that are probably pretty irritable to some, but I want them to talk about kind of what they went through and some of the things that went on in the past and kind of how they navigated. But this is starting up, so I'm glad you're looking forward to it, because I'm definitely going to do it. For sure.
I agree with you. I like the idea of having various voices on either way, and that's like as long as I don't need you got to respect me in my opinion. Like be tolerable, understanding, consideration, a little bit of consideration.
Yeah.
Like just tolerance. Tolerance doesn't. It's like being a guest at someone's house, and they make a very quote unquote healthy meal that tastes like a wet sock.
Yeah.
and it's like terrible, but you're like, thank you. You're like seconds, I'm stuffed. I'm like, I'm going to Jersey Mike's after this. I'm gonna get me a cheesesteak.
Nice.
and they're vegetarian, so it's like this.
Very
it's like
nice.
all vegetarians are bad, but some vegetarian food is pretty terrible when the person can't cook. I'm like, just let me take over.
Yeah,
I can cook better.
That food can go wrong very easily. So, is there anything to the rumor about Marvel buying Dark Horse? Yeah, I mean, I made this prediction as well. I do think there is. Now, I think that was pre-pandemic. In post-pandemic world, I don't know if Marvel's doing any kind of acquisitions, and I don't know anybody else either. I do think the other shoe drops here in the fall, and we're going to see a lot of scrambling and maybe some mergers and other things. I mean, the current state of the different publishers and the revenue and the current where things are at is not sustainable for the next 12 months, or they will not sustain past it. So we are going to see some places vanish. We're going to see some mergers happen. We're going to see some acquisitions done on the cheap. The only thing is, I don't think Marvel will be doing any of those. I think it was something that was viable. A while back. I mean, the only way maybe it happens is that Dark Horse completely falls apart and Marvel's basically buying the back stock, similar to how, the WWE has gone up and bought some tape libraries. I think that's possible, but I do think we're in for kind of an ugly next 6 to 12 months, and where the industry shrinks, and that's why I get maybe a little irritated on some of these kind of shrill, witch hunts and things that go on. It's like, now is not the time. Now's the time for everybody to unify and help bring money into this business. But
batten down the hatches, batten down the hatches, and prepare for bad weather. And it's like it's already the storm's upon you, so you're out there. I've actually had a window shatter in the middle of a storm. I had to go out there and like 60-mile-per-hour winds and put up a piece of wood, and had to get wrenched out of my hands and smack my brother in the arm and almost fuck. He's like, "Fuck, my arm got broke." And I'm like, "Yeah, it could have, but it didn't. Thank goodness." It's like I've never seen a bruise that deep before. It looked like a saw went into his arm, but it was just that deep. It was terrible. But it was one of those deals. But I think the likelihood of Marvel buying it, I have no clue. This first time hearing about this rumor. I'd say that Universal, that the basically IP farm, the Universal Studios or whatever deal.
Yeah,
I think that's more likely because it's like, well, Barbed Wire, The Mask, X, and was it Ghost? They're not getting Hellboy. I'm pretty sure they might get like a limited deal.
They wouldn't get Hellboy. Yeah,
they might get like a kind of first look, first refusal deal or whatever. But any of the Mignola stuff, like I could see a Mignola, whatever, series or something end up there. But maybe a Boom merger. I don't know, but it's like Marvel. Like, what's Marvel going to get out of it? Like, the dark, Marvel
back library. That's about it.
Yeah, but it's like, even then, it's like,
but they don't know what to do with they don't know what to do with the back library they have in their own shop right now.
Exactly. So. They got the entirety of Ultra Force. They got pretty much all the 2099 stuff that you'd think they'd release the omnibus by now for all of that. Well, I understand they don't want to release any of the Hulk 2099 because of the Gerard Jones stuff, but which I wouldn't want to give that guy any royalties. There's like that's why like any of the digital collections, they excise all the Hulk 2099 stuff from the digital collections.
Yep. No, but you know what? Well, anyway,
CrossGen. They got CrossGen as well.
CrossGen
and Men in Black. They actually have all of the Malibu stuff, which includes Men in Black.
Yeah,
but
actually,
because the contracts with Lowell Cunningham, I guess they can't really reprint any of the original black and white Aerosol era comics for some reason.
To this exact question, I'm pretty sure the person who owns the CrossGen library trademark is Marvel at this point. I may be wrong.
No,
but
Disney. Disney owns it, I believe.
Or Disney. Yeah, Disney. Sorry, not Marvel. Disney. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
Disney. So, yeah, I mean, I think I need to go and validate what I just said, but I think that's true. So it's interesting. Does Marvel get a new leadership team in 2021? I think that I think, so I'll be bold with predictions here. I think Joe Quesada does just step away. I think Feige got derailed a little bit from maybe doing whatever he wanted to do to that division or getting involved. And I think Joe Q goes. And I think if Joe Q goes, and I think things start to work their way downward, of people like Brevoort and others. So I do think there's some new leaders in the next 12 months. Yeah, I would say possible. I may be wrong. I'm not saying it like gleefully, like I'm sitting here like, I hope he goes. I'm not saying it for that reason. I think if you look at the writing on the wall, you look at how long tenures normally exist within comics, it's probably about that time. So, if you're a betting man, the odds are kind of in that favor. So,
yeah, I really have no clue, but I'd like to see, like I said, a big sea change. Unfortunately, it's the way it is that the industry is driven currently still by the big two, by Marvel and DC. The way if they are doing well, other comics are doing well. It brings people into a shop or brings people interested in comics in general. And if they can't get younger readers interested, like this idea of, or just new readers in general, but it's hard to get somebody interested when you got it's 80 pages, but it's like $10, and it's not even something super special. It's just 1,000th issue. I'm like that. To me, that would I think that could put a lot of people off.
It would.
But
for sure.
That's just my 2 cents.
We'll see what you say too. What comics are currently reading? I mean, first off, I'm reading everything new. I read them all, literally. It's not an exaggeration. And then I read plenty of manga, which I've talked about before in other channels. So don't go there. But the thing that's that over the last 2 weeks, and it's by hint of that Punisher book, I've been looking at a lot of the old Epic work. I've been looking at some of the 70s out of DC right before the big retraction in their group, and just finding a lot of good stories that I'd either forgotten about, hadn't read in a long time. It's amazing how quickly, that Nick Fury limited series, a 6-issue limited series back in the 80s was great. There's a lot of just good moments, good pacing, good stuff that, I mean, put it this way, if you're Marvel, some of these back in the 80s, and I think true of DC as well, if you're big publishers, not the worst idea in the world would be to go and grab some of these stories and then bring them up and either reprint them as is with maybe recolored or remastered, so to speak, or take some of these stories and literally redo them. Because there's some where the art wasn't necessarily the best, but the stories were still pretty top tier. So hire some good artists and, re-put these out as kind of a redone version. What are you reading today, Larry?
I actually have been going back. I'm looking forward to picking up the TMNT Last Ronin #1.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, because lately I actually missed out on getting the Death Metal #1. The shop I went to, they were sold out completely. I did pick up Last Ronin. I've already prepaid for. I'm looking forward to getting it. I've been reading a lot of back issues, a lot of black issue trade paperbacks. Long Shot by Andy Asenti and Arthur Adams. That trade paperback, I've been rereading that. Body Count by Kevin Eastman and Simon Bisley, a Raphael and Casey Jones team up comic where basically they said, the 4-issue nonstop action in this John Woo style with people being cut in half, guns, people brutal. It's just called Body Count. It's not called TMNT Body Count. And Top Shelf put out the hardcover because it's like IDW has the license, but it's one of those things. Let's not let kids get confused with this because this would probably. Why is Raphael using a Mac 10? Like gutting people down. I did pick up I thought it was a new comic. I thought, how 90s has come kind of back. 80s was kind of retro for a while. People were doing these 80s inspired comics. Even I'm guilty of that with my comic Neon Trash. Storm Warning, 1 copy still available. The list of 1 copy is
get that in there.
But there's a kind of resurgence of 90s comics, and I picked up a comic called Cadre 5 #1, and I was like, whoever did this, they went like they were going for that Rob Liefeld knockoff style, like with the group shot, and it's very limited information online, and I was like, like these people just like mom and pop deal, small. And turns out it wasn't a retro comic. It was just an old comic that the comic shop I went to actually had on the new rack. The vintage from 1995. It is
vintage.
Open it up and there's like a little bit of slight rust where the staples are. Everything looks crisp. A crisp black and white interior. So with it's like somebody whoever lettered this comic had never heard about like that the lettering has got to be shrunken down. They lettered it at like normal writing size, so it's the tiniest lettering you've ever seen. Page 1, the interior front cover gives you a rundown of every, like, Cadre 1 was this, Cadre 2, and like the story so far. If your first issue has to have a story so far, a primer, before you even read the page 1, where you don't know why you're fighting, who you're fighting, who the characters are. There's a couple of names. If you told me this was a prank, this is like one of those, like this. So like this is gonna be like a Neil Breen comic book, Neil Breen film, but in comic book form, or some kind of very bad Predator knockoff. Like, it's everything terrible you'd want in a comic. I can't believe that somebody actually made this that thought was good. I was tempted to email the people. I'm like, I'm not gonna be cruel, but it was dumb fun. A good. If you like Red Letter Media, best of the worst. That's the kind of comic it is. That's the so bad it's good, or so good it's bad, or vice versa, or whatever.
You said the magic words, though. It's fun. And I think that also answers kind of this question. What are your thoughts and possibilities why the meritocracy in comic book industry has been put to the back burner for some time? Currently, manga and European comics are kicking their butts. Well, as some will point out, certainly there are people who love the current state of where things are at, and there are people who hate manga and hate European comics for sure. But in general, I think those other regions are doing a little bit better job of selling fun. And I think the Jackass Whiskey and Pinto Beans there in the chat has said they do make it easier for people to pick up the book. You know, even things like I've said before, One Piece has a ridiculous amount of backstories and complexity and everything else that's going on, but you can pick up one of those issues and feel like it's, you know, easy entry in. And I think they do a little bit better job than that. Weirdly, of the three regions, it feels like the U.S. comic spends the most time talking about this problem, talking about how we need to be accessible, talking about how we need to get new readers, talking about how they talk about this stuff over and over and over. But yet the proof is in the output, and the output often just it almost looks like they say these things, but then they don't know how to carry it out, and that's been kind of the big challenge of why I think they're struggling. And I think also, by the way, there's a bit of a trap in there in that Marvel has always, not to be rude about it, they've like had a bit of an ego in how they present themselves in cons and other things. And they're very confident in their place at number one. And DC is a little bit more humble, but still, even there at the upper management, there's a feeling of like, we are the giants. Marvel and DC, we have the properties, we are the giants. And when you're so convinced of that, your motivation to kind of retool and look at your business and figure out kind of what's working, what's not, finding those new markets. In many cases, I think one of the reasons why Marvel struggles to find new markets is because there's this built-in belief that they're Marvel. And all they have to do is kind of show up to the table and say, we're Marvel, you know, buy our book. That's how they go into a new market. And unfortunately, you know, they have to work to get it. You don't just show up one day and you're like, oh, it's Marvel, let's give them their money. You have to actually build that audience, and it feels like that's why some of these other regions do a better job.
I honestly think also we're looking at a industry, American comic book industry, that post World War II, where during World War II we had the whole, you know, you can't, you know, recycle your comics, and that's why the whole value, you know, the value went up on these comics is, you know, so many printed, but they were recycled, you know, for the war effort. And then after that, we're talking, you know, like, wow, the fathers come home from war, if they come home at all. The kids are delinquent. The kids are out, you know, setting fires and maybe getting into trouble and doing other stuff. Not because the parents are busy working or the father is an alcoholic because of PTSD, where he had to kill people, you know, overseas, and he just can't handle his emotions. Like, oh, you just got shell shock. Just get over it. Oh, you'll be fine. Just go down to the local, you know, bar or go to the, you know, whatever VFW hall, whatever. On tap. I knew a guy who actually worked. He served World War II veterans, serving them beer at a BFW hall, and you know, like they were telling them, you know, it's kind of their horror stories. So it's like kind of traumatized him, even in his 20s. He's like, oh, I don't want to hear this. But comics were burned. I mean, you had the Frederick Wortham, you had the Kefauver hearings, and all this and that. Comics are, and also it's like, oh, you're an adult reading comics. Are you a little mentally, you know, troubled? Are you either crazy or are you slow? Like that kind of thing. You're not. The stigma was not in Japan. The stigma was not in Europe, where you had stuff like 1010. You had still being, you know, published during the war, and these people were, they honestly, they're in some ways sophisticated, but not really, because they're not sophisticated in a hoity-toity way necessarily, but more of a, they respect that art form. America is like, wow, who needs a comic? I have a radio. Who needs a radio? I got a TV. Or movies. I can go to the movies. I don't need to read this piece of entertainment. And when you had somebody like EC come around and say, hey, we're going to make, material for adults. Like somebody in the comments commented about the whole, the body count, characters getting cut in half, the TMNT comic, which that's by one of the creators. He was like, that's a side project with an artist that's slain the Horned God, Simon Bisley, the 2000 AD. These are not kid friendly. His art style is aggressive, and you ain't going to do like some kiddie friendly Ninja Turtles comic. It would not work. It would not be right. You can have this, but you can also have the straightforward Ninja Turtles. And also Ninja Turtles at the time, the comic was not kid friendly. The original comics, you had violence and blood and everything like that. It was a black and white comic. It's brutal, straightforward action in the same vein of Frank Miller and X-Men. You want to look at it that way, but this mentality where you can have Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse comics in Italy, and then have what most consider pornography, Milo Manera comics in the same general area. Yeah. So here it's like, and not look down upon. You go in there into probably like a gas station, a petrol station on some highway, and go in there and past where you get like chocolates and other stuff like that. There's some comics probably. I mean, there are another grocery stores there. Here it's like you got to go to specific shops in certain areas as if they're open, and go in there, and then you have where it's not treated. You've talked about there's bad shop owners, there's bad.
It's always bad everything.
But exactly. But where it's the environment, the atmosphere is totally different. Where it's just everyday. It seems like pretty much everyday thing. Here it's a specialty niche.
It's normalized, and the publishers have kind of dove into that. And by the way, there's a question: what are the best hero comics? We actually talked about that. We've talked about this a few times on the channel. I'll do you a favor. Rather than do it here, I'll do a video here in the next week, and purely around European comics. We'll spotlight them, we'll put them up, and I'll go through some of the art and give you some recommendations. There's a lot of European comics out there, and they're getting easier to get your hands on. So I'll point you right to it. That's going to be a better way to answer that question.
I'll just get my three real quick. Black Sad.
Yep. That's a great one.
Have Blueberry by Mobius.
Yes.
And then my third one would be the Nico Pol trilogy by Inkai Bilal. Nikopol trilogy. Enkibilal. It's astronaut loses his leg because he was frozen. Horus, the Egyptian guy, comes down. He can only have children every 2,000 years, and has to be with a blue-skinned, blue-blooded woman. And he's basically like it's a god sitting in the guy's bedroom, like basically saying, "Man, hey, this is how my life is." It's kind of weird. It's a weird comic, beautifully illustrated. But yeah.
Oh yeah. By the way, I want to say hi. We'll go over probably about another 25 minutes. Is that okay, Larry?
Sounds good.
We'll go over that. I'm roasting in here. With my terrible 82 degrees. Anyway, I'm just dying. It's been a day. Let me hit some things quickly. What do we think of Empire so far? Empire. So I'll tell you my perspective. It's better than I thought it would be. I still feel it still feels like I've read this all before. It's there's a sameness to it. And that's not really a knock on the creative team or anyone else. It's just certain aspects of this just feel like I've been down this road before. This gonna sound like such a tiny little, complaint in the grand scheme of things, but I wish that these events did not always center around, the enemy's got to get to Wakanda. Like, Wakanda's awesome, and it's got vibranium, and it's cool, and everybody wants to go there and everything else, but it just be like, it sets up these events where it feels like they're all checking the same boxes for where they have to go. And so I thought issue 1 was better than I thought. Still, I mean, I wasn't blown away, but it was, in the grand scheme of things, sure. And then it's had a decline for me, I guess. The stuff going on with Carol, and I'm not going to spoil it, but her arc, it's like, I've seen this before, lots of parts of it before. I wish somebody at Marvel would figure out that you can write a really powerful, compelling Captain Marvel by just having her go up against really top tier villains that are known. You don't have to always get into her family or all these other kind of weird shenanigans with her. You could just have her do amazing stuff. It will work. But anyway, it's all right. I mean, I'm going to be so sick of events by the time October rolls around. Are you reading Empire at all, Larry?
I avoided that like the plague. And here's the worst thing about it. I really like some of the characters featured, but nothing about that. I was like, there's going to be a big swerve. And I was correct. Everything like pretty much came out of that, like after like the first issue and everything. It was like, see, we got you. Yeah. It just seemed like, why would you? If it was like a landing Abnet team, if it was something along those lines, or some people that when they do space, or even a Starlin for that sake, or something like somebody like, okay, space, okay, could be pretty good. But nah.
I'll admit something that took the wind out of my sails, and this isn't a spoiler by any measure, because they're all saying in their interviews, is that this heads to a new space age and a status quo change for the Marvel universe that gets us back to cosmic. And it's like, I know I've said this before, but like I feel like we've had Marvel tell us we're getting back to cosmic like 2 or 3 times now. I mean, it's like either do it or don't. I hate this. The big status quo change is going to be back to cosmic, and my first thought was like, was there a moment where you withdrew from cosmic? I mean, you kind of weren't publishing books there, but like you did have this moment with Infinity back with Hickman like 5 years ago. I mean, what happened to that? But whatever. This question: do publishers raise prices knowing many, if not most, customers don't pay full retail through high volume mail order services or pull lists, or do they actually believe they are price insensitive? Probably the latter, honestly. I think it's always a little bit baffling to me when I learn that that there's several people within the publishers who aren't really aware of what pull boxes are or how they work. That seems weird, but it exists. I know that there was some open surprise when DC had the new distributors, and one of them was Discount Comic Book Service, and there were questions in Facebook groups that I'm in of editors and people saying, "Wait, there's a Discount Comic Book Service?" It's like, yeah. So I don't think there's a strategy here. I may be wrong. I mean, David Gabriel's a sneaky guy, but I don't think this is the plan, which is maybe sad.
And I think that's unfortunate. I think a lot of these people, like the ignorance of the industry. I'm not saying you have to be a savant and know every little in and out detail. It's like, well, the kind of ink that the ink nib that Kirby's inker Mike Royer used on these books. You don't have to know every little detail, but the fact that the ignorance, and it's like because there's no real need. I mean, you have this group of people, like they're just there to pad a resume. It's like, oh, I work for Marvel. It's like, oh, Marvel. I've seen Avengers. I saw Endgame. It's very good. Those are good resume pad, and that's it. That's not because. Yeah. And you have these. Like I said, we have these. We've talked. This has been talked to death by people. But yeah, there's no incentive because no one. You think you gonna have like them stories of like John Romita, singer, art director, keeping kind of thing, keeping an eye on things and everything like that, and kind of steering a ship. People didn't like that. I get it. Like didn't let me tell. Hey, that's not on model. That doesn't look right. Yeah, of course stuff slips through because hey, people are human. Yeah. And then you got apparently Virginia Romita, John Jr.'s mom, John Singer's wife, working in there as well, like stalking the halls. And like, I think it was a story of Ann Nocenti, who was a X-Men editor after Louise Simonson, went on to work on X Factor and eventually on her own books and everything like that. And same thing, Ann Nocenti was an editor who was editing. It's like, oh, what does she edit? Oh yeah, some of the best run of New Mutants, the Demon Bear saga, and all that that stuff where it's like, oh, you think you know comics? Like, hey, you like Bob McLeod, you like Sal Buscema, kind of straightforward, just honest to goodness comic art. I'm gonna bring Bill Sienkiewicz in. I'm gonna shake and rattle your world. Yeah. And the Demon Bear saga, which is it's one of my favorite comics of all time. That whole basically it's like a 15-issue block of amazing comics, and it's
Yeah.
Truly works of art. But
great stuff. I appreciate, by the way, you bringing up things that are newer. Like I said before, and for people who joined the chat late, there's a lot of great comics out there. We tend to, as people who talk on social media and YouTube and everything, we always go back to kind of the big favorites, and you could pretty much nail them down on a tin of comics to get talked all over and over and over again. But there's a lot more out there. So thank you, Larry, for bringing up some other ones.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I mean, I've been looking through a lot of them recently. A lot of the 48-page prestige format books, like the Excalibur, the adjectiveless Excalibur, just simply Excalibur, Claremont and Alan Davis. That first one kind of kicked off the Excalibur stuff, and then the Excalibur Mojo Mayhem with Claremont and Art Adams with the X babies and the kind of the ribs into like Secret Wars and New Universe and like new universe, like they're showing, oh, here's Crisis, here's this, and their New Universe is dilapidated house over in a corner. It's
it's true. I mean, Claremont put in a lot of little Easter eggs there with his distaste for kind of how it was just funny because he'd create these big sweeping things that other titles would get pulled into, but then when he was asked to do it, he was always so pissy about it, and he would always take it out in his work, one way or another. Paul mentions the True Believer reprint. So the short answer is, I mean, they're insignificant really in terms of moving the needle for they are priced so low you don't make a lot of money off them. The way you should look at True Believer is that it's something that's supposed to hook people to come in and buy more. And so if you look at it in that way, they can be a great marketing technique. But it feels like the comic publishers also have kind of given up on these, or it feels like an afterthought in how they're delivered to the shop and how they're promoted. Whereas what should be happening is, the comic publishers should, in advance of the movie coming out, pump out a bunch of True Believer comics that kind of fit around some of the things that are going on, either with the events or the movie, or just really try and use it as a way and put heavy marketing behind it. Like, find out where it started, right here, cheap, easy entry. They should really be pushing that angle, but it feels like that's some intern's job to kind of just shove those out into the world. I mean, I'm exaggerating. And by the way, we've talked a lot about some mistakes the industry makes and everything else, but this isn't meant to be a doggone creator show. There's plenty of people in these businesses who are hard workers and doing a lot. There's others who not, sure, but the big flaw for a ton of people that are coming into work for the big two is that there is like non-existent training and mentorship and help to get these people up to speed on what's going on, to point them to the right comics. So they have basically their own curiosity. And if you're making, as we saw today in that article, like $30,000 or less a year to have this job, what's going to be your incentive to do a bunch of after hours work to try and bring yourself up to speed? And if your upper management doesn't seem to care one way or another, and that's why I'm always a lot more critical about the upper management of these big publishers, who I think really should be doing a much better job for their people. And so I don't mean to bag on the smaller guys. I think they're being left out to dry, basically.
I agree, because when you look at these people, they're, a lot of them are there because of the marquee name, the value of working at Marvel. Say that I draw for Marvel, write for Marvel. I've stated in the past, I stated in the comment on that video that you posted that, and I think this is true. Like, if the pay to play, if you allowed Marvel to say next Monday said a statement saying, now on, if you would like to write a Marvel comic, X-Men, Teen, what is New Warriors? I'm about to say Teen Warriors, but close enough.
Teen Warriors.
All that. You want to write US1? You want to write White Tiger? You want to write the Western Ghost Rider? You fill this form out. You make you legal. Basically, like pay this much, this, that, whatever, and you can write and illustrate the comic. Basically, kind of leasing. You can have an X-Men comic that you wrote, but you only get to do one or something like that. You would have people paying to do that. If it was a pay-to-play scam, or just not scam, a deal, the people, they want their dreams to come true. And it's like this idea. It's like, that's what predatory business practices play upon. It's like same thing with Hollywood. It's like, wow, how can these producers and directors get away with all this abuse? It's like, because the line from LA Confidential, there's always moral that come. 10 more will show up on the bus tomorrow, and that's the same thing. They could, if they could do it if they could replace Kirby, they can replace anybody.
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's the thing about it is, like, as great as Kirby was, he wasn't irreplaceable. But you look at the comics after he left, like, yeah, that's when Stan kind of stopped writing the books. It's like because he wasn't really writing them. It was like Kirby doing all the heavy work, and Stan was just putting in the words.
There's a dark age there.
It's one of those things. Like, it's all everybody. Both of them are deceased. They can't defend themselves. But you might have a Finger moment, many years later, like where it was Batman created by Bob Kane, and only Bob Kane. And now, with
it's funny.
Donna Justice, you get the Bill. That's the best thing to come out of Donna Justice, the Bill Finger credit for Batman. I think
I agree with that. That was long overlooked, but it is funny how people often go from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and then some stuff happened, and then there was Claremont, and it's just there's this era in there. It's like, whoa, we just skipped a few years.
Yeah, it's very strange. It's very strange to see where things go. But any more questions, people? There's
been a lot of them. Thankfully, you guys have been just answering them yourselves, which is awesome. I can just sit back and drink.
Well, I saw somebody post earlier that's like, getting Todd McFarlane back on Spider-Man. Considering I'll say this about that Image United documentary, which is pretty good. It's still on Amazon Prime, like where if you have Prime, you don't have to pay for it. But it's a pretty cool documentary. It doesn't go over all the details, like the alleged embezzlement that allegedly happened with allegedly Rob Liefeld embezzling money allegedly, and other stuff. But like the backstabbing, like everybody's like, oh, I got Gaiman and Frank Miller and this and that, and and Valentino's like, yeah, and I'm publishing Alan Moore 1963, and then Jim Lee comes in, like, well, can we get Alan Moore? And so what happens is the 1963 annual, Jim Lee's like, oh, I'll draw it, and then of course he does it. He just wants Alan Moore.
Yeah,
and that's unfortunate. Like, but look at everybody else. Like they kind of went, these independent guys. Everybody took the Marvel money eventually. Lee and Liefeld, Heroes Are Born. Eric Larson was writing Wolverine and Invaders, down the line. The only person to pretty much stick to their guns and not go back to Marvel or DC, Tom McFarlane.
Oh.
So God bless him. It's like everybody else is like, they're like, come on back, Tom. We want you back in Spider-Man. It's like, nah, I'm good.
He's good. He knows where his money's coming from. Hey, a couple quick things. Any update on Bendis leaving the Superman books? Well, he's in his final arc, but that final arc feels like it's going to be. I mean, it's at least through February, so at least that long. I don't know. I would feel it's going to go a little bit longer than that. But I think Bendis's next logical stop is, whether it's Green Lantern or Flash or Justice League, he's heading to one of those. I think so. Enjoy that one. I'm sorry, that's not fair. Bendis is we've talked about that a million times.
Bendis is better on grounded books. Honestly, I hate to say it.
Totally better on grounded books. Totally.
It's one of those things, like, you shouldn't pigeonhole a writer, but his love for like Homicide Left, basically him and Alan Moore. I wonder who'd win in a love off. Put it better. The writer David Simon, Homicide, Year on the Killing Streets, The Wire, all that. I wonder who'd win in a love for that writer more, his work, Bendis or Alan Moore, because both of them really love David Simon's work, which is very clear in their work, their writing.
Let's get a Bendis question book out, and maybe just some of these others. Why not? But
GCPD Part 2.
Sure. Go for it.
As King KDI suggests in the chat, Gotham PD.
Yes, Gotham PD. What about what are the chances Marvel's intentionally pricing books out to justify shuttering the publishing arm for other properties? I don't think so. I think that would infer maybe they've got a strategy, and I just don't think they do. I think that this will either self-fulfill itself or not. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a strategy here. I'd almost feel better if there was a strategy, but it doesn't feel like it. You guys put a bunch of questions, answered this. If IDW shuts down all their licensed properties, will be scattered. Which companies do you think will pick them up? I think Boom will pick up some. I think Marvel will take the ones that they were doing through IDW and shovel them over to Disney Publishing and try and get something going over there. I think I don't know. Unfortunately, I think IDW is that is a company on the ropes right now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because they do have and which sounds weird for me to say about IDW, but they do have there are that is one of the things I was thinking of with the whole Last Ronin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it won't even get finished because IDW might go under before all the issues come out. I was thinking that because you can only have so many licensed properties, and people don't realize Hasbro bomb. Why? Hasbro gets money. Why? What's the incentive of having IDW? Like, they have what IDW has nothing. Like, basically is what connections to artists, but I mean you can farm that out to some like some Korean art studio or something or whatever cheapest, or Chinese art studio or some
there are sources. But
exactly.
South America, there's increasing agencies now that are designed to do this, that are being set up for this purpose. I do think we're going to see a lot more South American based agencies coming into comics than we have, but I just it's hard to look at that and say there's a lot of intrinsic value into the people who are managing kind of those relationships when those people are being paid $30,000 to $40,000 a year at the top level companies, and they don't have the connections. It's hard to believe anybody comes in and pays really high dollar, and especially with IDW, they're so saddled with debt, they have to get a certain amount of sale. They have to get a certain value number there, and it's just that value number that they need to get is higher than what anybody would pay right now. It's an upside down situation.
Yeah, one upside maybe if one thing they were to get, like say, pull the question down to what properties, Rom, Space Knight. But unfortunately, if they did, Marvel did get Rom Space Knight back, they'd probably ruin it by bringing him back to life, because that story, honestly, that was one of the few comics. I read most of G.I. Joe, I think more Transformers than G.I. Joe, but a lot of I didn't read much of Micronauts. But as far as the toy to comic book lines go, Rom Space Knight, because even though it ties in with Secret Wars 2 and there's a lot of stuff goes on, it was actually one of those comics that had a beginning, middle, and a satisfying, emotionally charged endings, because it's like you got invested in these characters, and there's stuff that happens, to Rom and Brandy, the two leads of the book, and it's this. And the fact that the story doesn't take place in New York, it takes place in West Virginia. It's like there's space aliens. Grab the shotgun. It's great. I love it. But it's unfortunately never been collected because of the IDW can't do it without probably licensing out the X-Men crossovers and all that kind of stuff. Things show up, and it's other stuff like I think Monica Rambeau shows up or something. I can't remember. He
does.
It's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
I think who do we think the industry leader is right now? It's of course based on your opinion of what you're reading. DC came out the gate strong. They're probably in the driver's seat sort of at the moment right now, but Marvel's pickup has been stronger than I thought. I thought that they would struggle a little bit more with having these gaps and everything else, but people are picking up Empire. They're picking up these other books. There seems to be this almost kind of drowning man wanting water approach for some of those things. So, the two are going to battle it out. The question will be who will be the de facto industry leader in February. And if DC can really stick the landing and get people excited following Death Metal, then they're gonna be on top for a little while. I think Marvel has King in Black that they're banking on, and that will do well. But it's a much more fractured picture. They're going to look more what's the best word? Spiky, where they'll have a couple of properties that'll do really well and then a steep drop off to some of the others. DC has an opportunity to get their entire line up to speed, and so hopefully, I would love to see both battling it out stronger, and then a third and fourth company coming out to battle it up. That would be awesome.
The more competition, the better. The more healthy it's putting basically putting two people in a pit, Thunderdome style. Fight it out. The strong shall survive. You don't want this limping along. The perceived, I think Marvel is probably perceived more because they got the IP, they got Disney, they have the movies, they have the games, they have the kind of the Spider-Man, you got your Miles Morales, you got your Peter Parker. Everybody forgets Miguel O'Hara. Everybody's like, first POC Spider-Man. No, it's Miguel O'Hara, damn it.
It is. Yeah, you kind of forget about some of the progress.
And he was a dick. He was an utter dick, but eventually he softened up and turned into put it politely. He became more less of a dick. Yeah. He became a very well-rounded character. He became a very interesting and the world was fascinating too. But I think that's Peter David, and you had, but you had just so much potential, and then they just, because it's the future and it's the 2099 line, and it's that kind of failed experiment. It's like, no, because you guys are going under. I mean, you're the whole Heroes World debacle and throwing money at we got to have money for Liefeld and Lee, and when they didn't even finish all 12 issues. 13, sorry, everybody forgets there's 13 issues. The 13th issues were all Image tie-ins. They were Wildstorm tie-ins. Yeah. That's why they've never been collected. But
the big question is probably a quick one. Would you keep a superstar team on a character like America Chavez 6 months to boost the character? If I was committed to that character, meaning I believe that character was going to make me money, and then absolutely, yes. If America Chavez was a character that I wanted to bank on, that was going to maybe have a Disney show, whatever, that was going to make me some money, this is the only way to do it, is to keep a superstar team on that character. I think if you're going to go at putting a new character into the world and try and make that comic a success, you have to do it with top talent. You can't do it with very indie-based, creators who would frankly rather be writing an indie comic, roll that out and expect it to be a mainstream success. It's not going to be. You're going to have to put the money in, and it costs money. So that's what you're going to have to do. So, I mean,
bring in Joe Casey, who created her. Bring in a good artist that can deliver on time. It's somebody that's like, exciting. Somebody like, oh my God, like it doesn't have to be like an old named artist. Get whoever's doing the interiors. Okay, a name just popped in my head for some reason. Kenneth Rockford. Because he actually worked on her too during the Ultimates stuff, like the kind of the last days of the Ultimates line. And have him do the covers, do the interiors. He does very sexy art, very interesting art. I think he's fast too.
He is fast.
Yeah. So you got him on the interiors, got him on the covers. If you want to do your stupid incentive covers, was it David Gabriel? What his name is?
David Gabriel. Yeah. I mean, whatever you're going to do, you got to put, and it's both a superstar team and a consistent team. It's got to be a consistent team. You can't launch a new character and then 6 months down the road already be having fill-in artists and other things.
It's consistent. Give me a year of the same artist. You know what? If that's what's so amazing. Hawkman, Venditti, Hitch, consistent. A year uninterrupted. Brian Hitch.
Yeah, Brian Hitch is his name. And this is, it shows it can be done. Hitch is not only a big name. He had a reputation for not being the fastest artist in the world, and yet we had a long, consistent run with that creative team. It worked out. It's not impossible. You can do it, and that's the comic companies have to pony up the money and actually do it. It's critical. I did watch this documentary. I thought it was great. Did you see the Todd McFarlane "Like Hell I Won't" documentary?
I did not, and because I don't have basic cable with Sci-Fi. I just have over the air and internet. I didn't have the YouTube or whatever, and whatever's on Amazon Prime. But I'm looking forward to it because I listened to that the Cartoonist Kayfabe interview with Todd McFarlane, and I've watched a few stuff like this, some of the behind the scenes stuff with the there's like a lot of kind of more like one-on-one interviews like the Sci-Fi Channel did in the past, and stuff like that. But yeah, he very opinionated, and he's like, do a page a day, 8 hours a page, do a page a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And it's like, why aren't you doing this, dude? We need more art from you in the world. Yeah, let's do your own thing. But
it was a good interview on Cartoonist Kayfabe, and that's a great documentary. I would recommend it for sure. Let me wrap up here. We've got probably about 2-3 more minutes here. I'll quickly say, so store update next week. Next week I'm gonna have a big store update. So next week it's coming. What do you think the biggest hurdle is creators having getting into industry today? I'll be a little flippant here. a lot of their their peers or the people who are already in the industry are jackasses and and get in the way. It's one of the biggest hurdles. I think it is tough to get into comics. You got to have the right friends and the right connections, and it's just way too hard. And there's some talented people who just give up. And that is by far, I think, the biggest hurdle creators have. Just no support. The people who are out there who should be helping them out often have their own self-interest in line. I have a video coming up where I show some actual stats on this, but there are kind of mid-level creators who don't have jobs at the big two, and they quote unquote mentor some new people coming in and encourage them to do things like run blockchains on massive amounts of their audience. And it kills your ability to gain momentum as an up and coming creator. You need to get an audience. You need to be in front of as many people as possible, showing your work. Now is not the time to start limiting your audience down. And yet people almost use that as a test, like prove to me that you're not one of the baddies by blocking a ton of people and thus limiting your own audience to prove your allegiance with no real promise of going anywhere. There's the kind of, it's not mean girl stuff, but it's gross. It's definitely control. And I think it's hurting creators. I've had many creators show up in my email over the last week saying that they were pushed and pressured to run blockchains against freaking everybody because otherwise they were going to be accused of being part of the wrong crowd and they wouldn't get help, and they didn't get help anyway. And now they're sitting there with like 150, 200 followers on Twitter and nobody on Instagram, and they're trying to do art. It's just there needs to be better people out there who are willing to help. That's the biggest. Sorry for a little rant there.
That's fine. Major Tom 331. What do you think of what's wrong with the DC New Age of Heroes? With a line of comics, big press rollout, looked to be the opposite of everything Marvel did wrong. Yeah, but inconsistency. That's what killed it. Honestly, for me, the fact that they couldn't even go 6 issues, like 3 issues in. By the time the first issue came out, they'd already changed the main artist they launched with for the most part. Jim Lee didn't even do the whole issue. He was like 16 pages. It's like this idea. It's like seemed like a good idea. They pressed for it, and then they didn't even really commit, except for I'm about to say Mr. T and the Terrifics, but Mr. Terrific and the whatever, the Mr. Terrific and the Terrifics, whatever. That book, which it started bringing in like Mr. Tom Strong and stuff like that, some of the Alan Moore, America's Best Comics characters. But yeah, it's basically, hey, let's do Marvel's concepts over at DC. It's like we've seen this before. We've seen this multiple times before, and let the artists run wild, but then you don't have any. The inconsistency is what killed it for me, and I think honestly killed it for most people. I
think you're right. No, I mean consistency. That was the problem. It was the right idea, but it was consistency, and they didn't seem like they committed to the bit. Do you think Mad will return when AT&T executives realize now? Yes, I do think Mad will return. I'll peg it as next year. I think it will come back. I think it will come back in a different format, but it is an IP that they can do something with. I think they'll figure out a way to ingest some aspect of Mad into what they're doing with HBO Max. I definitely think it's coming back for sure. Who's running DC? I mean, in theory, Jim Lee, but I would argue a lot more is run by Bendis and Snyder right now.
Look at Jim Lee's Wildstorm record, how much of a mess that was. And honestly, I'm surprised it isn't a bigger mess at DC. Jim Lee was never really he's more of like sit back and kind of collect a paycheck kind of guy. He doesn't seem like a very, very good manager of anything, to be brutally honest. I mean, damn good artist.
Great artist, a good guy. Very good guy.
Apparently really good. Yeah, exactly. Apparently really good. But as far as running a business, Wildstorm, Worldstorm, all that stuff. Let's get Alan Moore and then saddle him with a crappy crossover when he's basically turning Wildcats from a X-Men knockoff joke, whatever. Hey, I'm popular for X-Men. Let's do my version of X-Men and turning it into something. Oh yeah, you've been fighting that war for thousands of years. Oh, it's been over for a long time here. Like you've been on Earth fighting it out. Hey, we're at peace now. Oh, but by the way, because you're subclass, you were used during the war, you got to go live underground with your kind. Hey, wait, what? Like, no, you're not equal. There's no equality in this society. Get out of here. And it's like this, whoa, like it blew your mind kind of.
There's some good stuff in there. Yeah,
back when Alan Moore actually cared until kind of the whole ABC deal. Let's sign him up. Hey, DC's. Hey, as soon as Alan Moore signs, DC buys him out. And DC was chasing Alan Moore and he was working for Extreme and Awesome with Liefeld, but he wasn't under contract with Liefeld. something just doesn't smell right. But I'm not exactly saying that Jim Lee sold him out to sweeten the deal for the buyout of Wildstorm. It just seems that way.
Yeah.
When you hop on a plane and go and talk to Alan Moore directly, and he comes up to you with a cane, and you're scared, that means you've done something wrong.
And now, in fairness, I would be terrified if Alan Moore came at me with a cane.
That beard will attack you. That beard's a more scary thing. What's living in that? But snake gods and all that.
Yikes! No, in all seriousness aside, or joking aside, thank you for everybody who showed up. I appreciate it. I think we had almost 75 people at one point, so that's awesome. I appreciate you coming to listen to me ramble. And Larry, I thank you for coming to join me on this and
ramble. Larry joining and ramble. Thank you so much for everyone to join. Thank you, Perch, for having me. And this is fantastic, folks. Thank you for coming by and having fun and answering each other's questions. A wonderful community you have here.
It's a good group of people. I really appreciate it, and I think as I've said before, the comments in the videos, you guys write amazing things. It's great. It's thoughtful. I like that people come up and argue with me. I like that. I want that. Honestly, this is not an echo chamber. The whole point is to throw some ideas out there. If we were in a comic shop together, I would not expect you guys to all be sitting there like going, yes, I am just taking what you say and listening to all of it. No, I expect argument. That's the fun part. And you can have an argument without it being, World War III and go into like personal nonsense. You can just disagree on stuff and talk it through. And that's what I think is really cool. So thank you all for doing that. Keep arguing with me. It's fun. I like it. And if you haven't found Larry, he is on Twitter right here. If you're looking on the screen, got his art there on DeviantArt. Larry, any other place they can find you?
Well, Twitter at Larry King Undead. If you're not on Twitter for any reason because of the way Twitter is, you'll want to shoot me an email, LarryKingUndead@gmail.com. To shoot me an email. I sell comics. I can give you like a first 2-page previews of some of the comics I have, pretty reasonable prices. All prices include shipping. If you're international, prices will be more. Just tell me where you are, do what country, and so I can add the extra of that for the invoice, and we'll take it from there. So, commissions. I take digital and traditional commissions, so it all price varies on difficulty, characters, backgrounds, color, stuff like that. So, yeah, that's the way to contact me, and there you go.
Absolutely. Find Larry, reach out. He does great work, and I think Larry and I hopefully will have something to announce ourselves here fairly soon.
Yes, hopefully soon, but we'll keep that close to the vest until then.
Keep it close to the vest. Absolutely. I will put the link to Larry's information in the description, so you should see it there. YouTube continues to be weird, so as always, like I posted on my comments, they often delete comments and do other weird things, so it feels like I'm battling YouTube half the time, but anyway, it is what it is. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Hope to talk to you all again real soon. I wish I had a good end tagline, but I'll say bye. So bye. Thanks for listening.